Yellow and Red makes by Digits 27 in chapter 54. Did you know? The large fox looked back at Naruto and slowly she shook her head. Naruto just frowned dangerously. Don't lie to me. I can turn this place back into a sewer, you know? The QB just scowled at the idea she would lie, manipulate, tell half-truths, evade questions. Yes, lie. No, I assured you I did not know. It was as much of a surprise for me as it was for you. Naruto scowled, staring at the fox as he searched for any deception in her eyes. How could you not know? He was the one who sealed you. Kurama narrowed her eyes and quickly countered it. And he was the one who conceived you. Naruto just turned as he sat down on the grass, leaned back and looking up at the sky before pounding his fist fiercely into the ground like a child having a temper tantrum. But all this time, Kyubi just sighed as she walked over slowly, sitting behind Naruto and letting him rest his head against her soft body. And Kushina, your mother, was my last gin jerky. Naruto looked around into Kyubi's eyes, but she ignored him, instead staring off into the distance of the fake world they resided in. Her soul was much tighter than yours. I knew barely anything of what went on during my time inside of her. Naruto turned back around, placing his head down on Kyubi's fur. I got glimpses during her moments of weakness, such as when she was scared or angry, or Naruto looked around, but didn't speak when he saw the slight blush on Kurama's face, even through her fur. It was how I came to know of her, of Minato, of the Leaf Village. I lived for those brief glimpses of the world outside. Otherwise, I was chained down so securely I couldn't twitch a hair on my tails. She sighed unconsciously, rubbing the tail against her paw, where a chocolate chain I had once been embedded. If I had known about her having a child, I would have told you. But by the time I escaped, well, I wasn't of the soundest mind. Naruto didn't pry. The events leading up to her stealing inside of him were always a touchy subject. What was she like? Kurama looked around, smiling softly as she saw all the anger had left Naruto. Instead, he just seemed a little empty. Like I said, I only caught glimpses, but from what I saw, a lot like you. She was passionate, but had a temper that was legendary in Konoha. They called her the Red Hot Habanero. Naruto smiled fondly at the name, making him chuckle, as he realized his father was the Yellow Flash and his mother was the Red Hot Habanero. No wonder he loved the color orange so much. What about the four? He paused for a moment as he stared wistfully up at the illusionary sky. My father. Kurama looked down at him, taking a deep breath, which raised Naruto's head up on her side. A powerful, intelligent, charismatic, hands. Naruto looked up at her curiously as she coughed and looked away. Handy around the house. Naruto frowned, but settled back down on her side, not noticing the new blush that adorned the fox's face. A true genius of his time, much like you. He was always thinking of new ideas and techniques, always trying to surpass his limitations with speed, seals, his techniques, everything. And Naruto smiled as he thought of the bond about the bond he now shared with his father through their mutual love of jutsu. Would they be proud of me? Kyubi just looked down at Naruto, a little bemused. Who am I to say? Naruto frowned, but in the end he saw her point. She didn't really know them, not personally. She definitely wouldn't know their thoughts about him, even if he so desperately wanted that to be true. Thanks in a way, Kurama, for at least being honest with me. The large fox nodded her head slowly, settling it down on her paws as she stared off into the forest that surrounded them. Try not to focus on the past, kid. Instead, focus on what you can still change. Look to make those around you proud, as opposed to those who are dead. Naruto sighed. He knew what he was saying was true, but he couldn't help but wonder just what his parents would say if they could see him today. Would they approve of him leaving the village? His father was Hokage after all, and if he had survived, Naruto would have been a part of his clan. Would they have proved it to Takuya? Strangely, Naruto found that he didn't care all that much. It brought a smirk to his face. What do you think the old man kept it from me? Kyubi just scoffed as she shifted her body into a more comfortable position, prompting Naruto to do the same. You saw how the old Golden-Oki reacted. You don't think if Iwona had known about you, they wouldn't have tried to kill you as revenge for what your father did during the war? Naruto nodded with a frown as he thought back to the old man in Suna, who had simply attacked him because he looked like Minato. He chuckled softly. The clues were all there. The resemblance, his love for seals, hell, even his fashion sense with his clothes. joke. I'm a bit of an idiot for not seeing it sooner, aren't I? QB smiled softly, not lifting her head off her paws. No more so than those around you. People tend to see only what they want or expect to see. It's just human nature. Naruto nodded calmly, yawning as he stretched out on QB's warm body. Well, I think that's enough hiding. I better go out and face everyone. I'm sure there will be a lot of awkward questions I can't answer. QB smirked as he stood up, stretching off his imaginary body. I'm always just a thought away. Naruto smiled down at her kindly, scratching her lightly between the ears, which earned him a small purr of pleasure. I know. Naruto woke up stiffly, and it took him a moment to loosen up his neck before he could look down. His waking up had disturbed Taiyo, who bleedily cracked her eye open. Sitting up with him as she rubbed them free of dust, she smiled as she looked him over, checking that he was okay. Once satisfied, she quickly hugged him before swinging her legs out of the bed and standing up. She stretched, which gave Naruto an excellent view of her panties getting pulled up her firm thighs. Good to see you're finally up, shithead. Gara was worried about you. She looked at him for a moment as he looked back. She was smirking fiercely as he just looked down at his own body. What? Taiyo just grinned before plopping herself back down on the bed next to him. You fainted. That's fucking gay. Naruto just pouted while she giggled. How would you react if you find out the man you looked up your whole life was your father? Taiyo just stared at him curiously as if she couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Happy? Naruto pouted again while Taiyo stood up again. Aside from that, Taiyo just shrugged. She honestly thought she was best off without her family. Otherwise, she never would have met Naruto. Stop fucking reminiscing. And come join me in the shower. Naruto was silent for a moment before a grin spread across his face. He quickly ran after Taiyo just as her ass disappeared around the corner of their ensuite bathroom. And Gar looked quite relieved when he saw Taiyo and Naruto emerge from the room with damp hair and large grins plastered over their faces. Fu looked on with concern hearing what had happened. She hadn't been there because Matsuri had offered to take her for something to eat, while Gar had gone to check on the disturbance at the gate. Gar had later told her what happened, and she was shocked to say the least. Even in Takagakure, she heard of Minato Namikaze, and to think that her brother was his son was strange. Oni-san, Naruto nearly found himself bowled over as Fu practically launched herself at him. He swiftly caught her as she wrapped her smaller arms around him, as he just smiled in amusement. Hey Fu, it's not like I was dead or something. Fu just squeezed him tighter. Even the thought of her big brother dying was too much for her. He was a pillar of strength to her, something constant and unbreakable that she had built for her new life around. He carefully set her back down before ruffling her hair, knowing that the familiar, if slightly irritating gesture would remind her that he was still okay. You're taking this remarkably well. I would have thought you would have been more you would have a more interesting reaction. Naruto smiled, knowing the redhead was alluding to his pranking days before all his days were filled with either training Taiyo or Fu. Yeah, well, I had some time to think about it. Everyone knew that he was talking about his mindscape, so just left it at that. While Gar nodded in understanding. Well, he looked over at Taiyo in confusion. Well, what? Taiyo just sighed as she playfully punched him in the arm. What are you going to do about it? Naruto blinked honestly. He hadn't thought about it that much. He wasn't even sure what he could do about it. He was sure that there were probably some things his parents had left him. Maybe in a state somewhere in Konoha. Maybe if Konoha hadn't used them when he left. Other than that, he realized it didn't change his life all that much. He was still Shinobi of Suna. He still had to and Fu, and he was still Naruto Uzumaki, although he guessed that he could possibly take his father's name. Naruto Namikaze. Everyone looked at him strangely before he realized he said it out loud. Taiyo seemed thoughtful while inside she was thinking along the same line. Taiyo Namikaze, Taiyo Uzumaki Namikaze. The Fu just smiled at her brother, thinking that the name sounded cool. I think it suits you. Naruto smiled at Matsuri, but inside he was still contemplating it. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki. Everyone just laughed lightly as the mood returned to how it usually was between them. Yes, well, I'm sure you'll have plenty of time to think of all the ways you can change your name. As you might have noticed, the Kage conference is today, and the only one yet to arrive is the Mizukage. Naruto just nodded as he pulled on his coat. The black flame the calls now have another meaning. He was thinking of all the ways that he could really shock Konoha as payback for his childhood. Thinking about one of his old ideas to walk into Iwa, hence the fourth. He wondered if he could get a coat just like his made him. That would really freak them out. With the starter, he realized his father's things, including that Kota, could still be in Konoha somewhere, as well as his mother's, and they would belong to him. Suddenly, all that pressure he had relieved in his mind came hurtling back down on his shoulders, as the immensity of having a family was fully realized. Breathe, kid. He did that, taking in a large breath before straightening up. He could discuss all of that with Tsunade later. For now, he simply followed Gara out of the nice hotel they had been staying at, holding his head high and uncovered with a large smirk, admiring his features. For once, the whispers of the people around him didn't bother him. He was content and he was happy that they made their way through the streets until they arrived at the Hokage's tower, where the Kage would be meeting in an hour. He wondered where Mei was. He was sure she would have wanted to be here to make sure the land of water got the first say. Hell, if only he could put aside his difference somewhat and stay for a few days, then she should have been able to. Then again, Kiri was still recovering, and they might have had more pressing matters to attend to. Even so, she could send somebody into her stead. At least so they knew what was happening. He would just have to wait and see. The meeting wasn't for an hour. Mitsuri and Fu couldn't go into the meeting, so they went off somewhere together, which made Naruto smile. The two were really starting to bond. Naruto and Taiyo accompanied Gaara on their side, walking like the bodyguards they came here to be. They seemed to be the first to arrive at the hall and took their place, designated by the Tsunegakure symbol on a small placard. The room wasn't all that big, but it had a large U-shaped table, which was perfect for meetings such as these. Gaara calmly sat down while Taiyo and Naruto leaned against the wall behind him. A few minutes later, Tsunade walked in, flanked on one side by Jiraiya and on the other by Kakashi. She hesitated when she saw that Gaara was already here, but more specifically, she looked at Naruto, who didn't acknowledge her presence at all. She sighed before nodding curtly at Gaara, who returned the gesture. Tsunade took her place at the head of the table, but both she and Jiraiya sent worrying glances towards Naruto, who continued to stand silently, only watching out for any threat to his Kasagage and friend. A was the next to arrive, bursting through the doors in his typical manner. With his usual stony look, he was quickly followed by B and Yujito, who both waved at Naruto warmly. He smiled back at them, upsetting Tsunade that she didn't get that kind of reaction. A sat down next to Gaara on the side from Tsunade, while B and Yujito went and stood by Naruto and Taiyo. The four of them chanting fondly while the doors opened again. Surprisingly enough, it was Mei who entered next. And Chojuro as their bodyguards. She seemed flustered by something, and Chojuro was looking nervous, but they too took their place in the hall, sitting down in the seat next to Tsunade and opposite Gaara. She received the customary welcome from the gathering Kage before returning to her quiet irritation at whatever had gotten under her skin this time. Finally, Oniki burst into the room, looking the angriest out of the five. He said nothing as he walked over to his seat, sitting down while all the time shooting murderous looks into Naruto's direction. So Tsunade looked around at the gathered Kage and their personal escorts. So some of the most powerful shinobi in the elemental nations, all gathered in the same room. To anyone else, it would have been frightening, but it would have earned the positions in that room. She coughed loudly to get everyone's attention. As the host of the conference, it was her job to get the ball rolling. What is he doing here? Just as she was about to speak, Oniki had interrupted, still staring daggers at Naruto, who looked back impassively and impressive feat when staring down at Akage. And Gar also looked back calmly, although looking closer, people could spot the fine mist of sand that had materialized around him out of nowhere. He is my escort. Oniki growled as people felt the tension in the room rise exponentially. I don't care who he is. I want the son of that bastard out of here! Nagata's eyes narrowed imperceptibly as the floor around his feet began to swirl with sand. Naruto beat him to the punch, though, as one of the kunais suddenly impacted with the wall behind Oniki's head, brushing his head by mere centimeters. The woman's eyes opened slightly wider, but the message was clear. If Naruto had wanted to, that kunai would have gone straight through his head. He growled imperceptibly at the young blonde shinobi, anger that he would dare try to even get near to strike Akage. After the boy had passed out in the street, he had been quickly carried away by Gaara and Hiya. Tsunade kept him or his shinobi from meddling. It angered him that after all this time, the fourth son had been hiding from him, and he wasn't able to do a damn thing about it. All eyes turned to Naruto as the two rock shinobi suddenly rushed him, leaping up and over the table to apprehend the man who attacked the Tsuchikage. However, as soon as they got close, Naruto simply vanished, reappearing where his kunai had impacted with the wall. Oniki turned to him, shocked at seeing the jutsu in use after so long. Naruto simply stared him down. I would appreciate it if you did not talk about father that way. His tone was cold, far more deadly than somebody his age should be able to muster. Although Oniki was unperturbed, the other Kage watched the confrontation silently. Although A had a small smirk just tweaking at the edge of his mouth as he saw Naruto go to toe with Oniki. But by that point, Akatsuchi and Kurotsuchi had managed to get back to their grandfather's side. But Naruto simply disappeared again, reappearing next to Tayuya in a flash of yellow. The room was silent as everybody just looked at Naruto in wonder, but his face had returned to his neutral, impassive glare. But both Raikage and Mizukage were a little shocked by the confrontation, as were the various bodyguards and escorts around the room. However, A had always had his suspicions about Naruto. This simply confirmed them. Likewise, Mei smiled as she realized why Oniki was so upset and the nagging feeling that she had about Naruto. So now they finally cleared everything up as she coughed loudly, drawing all attention to her. Now that is out of the way, I think we should get down to business. Oniki snarled, but reluctantly sat back down. Gaara too recalled his sand, reabsorbing it into his body. Tsunade smiled pleasantly, but inside she was reconsidering if doing this was such a good idea after all. Now then, I believe the Kagedona would like to begin. Gaara nodded as the same files that he had given to Tsunade were handed out to each Kage via their escorts. Containing these files is all the information currently known about the Katsuki, their members and their various strengths. As you can see, their spy network and their monetary base have been dealt a crippling blow with the loss of members. Sasori, former of Suna, and Kakusu, former of Taki. The other Kage nodded absently as they read through the surprising detailed reports, while Tsunade smirked. Jiraiya read it all, his eyes widened visibly when he came across a name he never thought he would see again. Oniki was also seething when he came across the latest report, noting the large black X across his photo, which could only mean one thing. He kept it to himself, though, but he knew he would have to deliver the news to Kurotsuchi later, and she wasn't going to be happy. Jiraiya was the first to speak up as he flicked through the dossier some more. This is an impressive report. How did you get this information? Gaara smiled lightly, and Taiyo's smirk increased. Tsunade groaned, knowing that would be the first thing Jiraiya would note. Taiyo infiltrated the ranks of Akatsuki personally, and she was the one to compile all the information before her situation became compromised by the death of Sasori. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes, looking over Taiyo once. Wasn't that a little irresponsible to send a Chunin into an organization composed of only S-ranked criminals? Gaara just raised his brow at Jiraiya, curious as to the man's intentions. What I do with my shinobi is none of your concern. I understand her capabilities, and it was the fact that she appeared to pose no threat to the organization that made her ideal for the mission. And I trust that during her tenure as a spy, she would be able to suitably increase in power enough to earn their respect and infiltrate the organization better. She's also one of my most trusted friends. If I did not believe her able, I would not have done so. Gaara spoke the entire time with a perfect level voice, making his argument sound incredibly convincing. Yes, well, origins of the formation aside, I think it is more pertinent that we discuss what to do with the organization itself. With 4 members currently dealt with, I believe we will not have a better opportunity than we do now. The Kage, despite all the differences and petty disputes, not in agreement that the organization was becoming too much of a pain. Maybe Toby can help. Everyone in the room shot around as the familiar voice spoke up. They were all shocked to see none other than a man dressed in Akatsuki robes with an orange spiral mask flipping through the pages of the file, immediately faster than most could even think. Not to send a kunai flying at the man, only to watch it pass right through him, as if he weren't there. The man looked up from the file, and everyone could have sworn they could see a pout on his face despite the mask. Toby didn't make it into the file. He'll show you. Toby is a good boy and make it into the Akatsuki for sure. Once he delivers the message from Leader-sama. He clapped and laughed enthusiastically, causing everyone in the room to seriously doubt the man's sanity. Gaara, on the other hand, stared at him curiously. He was not in the file, but he perfectly matched the description Taia gave of Toby. And he kept referring to himself as such. What message? Toby turned to Gaara, but it was clear he was addressing the entire room. Leader-sama wants to deliver a warning. If the mean old Kage give up the jerky, then nobody else has to get hurt. He turned his attention over to Naruto. Leader-sama also wanted to tell Namikaze-san to give back the rings he stole, because stealing isn't a very nice thing to do. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man before calmly reaching into his pouch on his belt. He removed the fingers before slowly and deliberately sliding them onto the fingers on his right hand. Tell Pain to come and get them himself. Toby just nodded fiercely. Will do. Again, his sanity was brought into question as the strange man bounced enthusiastically. Suddenly, Naruto disappeared, appearing not a second later with a Rasengan in his hand, which he attempted to plunge into Toby's unprotected back, only to phase right through the man. When he was fully out of Toby's body, the masked man swiftly grabbed him by the collar of his mask, collar of his coat, and with surprising strength, slammed him into the ground, or would have if Naruto hadn't flashed over to Taia. You're fast, Namikaze-san, but your daddy already tried that one on me. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. Toby started to phase to the floor, and we'll kill you. He disappeared from the room entirely with a sinister giggle, leaving the Kage to suddenly erupt in an outcry. How did he get in here? What are you playing at, Tsunade? Mr. Kage-sama, this place is not safe. We must leave immediately. Why do you have those rings, boy? Quiet! Everyone stopped their bickering as Tsunade stood up, throwing her chair back into the wall to stick there with a dull crack. Kakashi and Jiraiya were forced to jump out of the way of the deadly chair or risk getting crushed into the wall. Everyone just stared at Tsunade before she sat down on the new chair Jiraiya somehow produced them. Now then, are we going to bicker around amongst ourselves like a fresh getting team, or are we going to sit down and discuss what just happened? All the Kage present, save Gaara, who remained stoic, grumbled, but sat back down nevertheless. Now, it is clear the Akatsuki are trying to intimidate us with this obvious scare tactic, but we are Kage. We should not respond to such a threat by blowing it out of proportions. There are only 6 of them, and thousands of us. They only pose a threat if we remain divided and continue to put our jerky at risk with isolation. Naruto huffed from his position across the room, but luckily everyone ignored him, save Oniki, who sent him another dangerous look. Was this about art and jerky? Iwa has already lost Han and Roshi to those bastards. While none of you have lost anybody. Hell, soon already have 3 jerky, 2 of them in this very room. Maybe they could spare one of them. Whatever happened to the balance of power your predecessor and my begrudging equal was always blathering on about? Naruto growled again. It was really starting to get to him how Oniki kept blathering the disrespectful respectfully the past Hokages and the two people he looked up to. If Jiraiya's expression told anything, he also wasn't very happy. The jerky that have taken soon after home have all done so of their own free will, myself included. Oniki just laughed right in Gaara's face as he pointed straight at Naruto. Right, from what I heard, he stole the seven toes right out of Takagakure, injuring some of their civilians to do so. Naruto growled again as the grip around his kunai tightened, turning his knuckles white. I saved Fu from that place. Oniki sneered at the blonde, daring him to make a move. More like kidnapped. Naruto growled even louder as his canines began to elongate to the notice of everyone present. You have no right to judge me. Only they have that right. He motioned to Gaara and Yujito before looking around at the room. All of you talk about protecting us, keeping us away from the Koski, but there's a reason they're so so easily able to get to us. They treat us like prized weapons to be fought over and protect. But what do you do in times of peace? You treat us like demons, letting your people fear or hate us, or treat us like animals. That's the life I took Fu away from. That's the life I escaped here in Konoha. His eyes had already shifted to red slits by the time he was finishing, and he was being visibly restrained by the wall of sand. Naruto, no! The decree have been mistreated for long enough. You devalue us so much, then start fucking showing it! He panted heavily before taking a deep breath and controlling himself. When his eyes opened again, they were back to the usual cerulean blue, and his teeth had retracted. The room was shocked into silence. Even Yujito and B were staring at Naruto. Nobody had ever spoken out with such passion about them before. The Biju aren't your weapons to control, and neither are your jerky. We are shinobi, yes, but we are also humans. Naruto huffed loudly before taking his place back against the wall behind Gaara. He had enough of the old man and woman making decisions about the futures of others. The rest of the room was silent again as everyone absorbed what the blonde had said. Even Oniki seemed passive as he remembered Han. They had been good friends before the hatred of the village drove the kind man out. Naruto just held up a hand at Tsunade, his eyes narrowing as he looked anywhere but at her face. Save it. It's not like it matters. If I have to, I'll kill every last member of the Koski before they hurt anyone else close to me. He wrapped his arms around his chest, clearly indicating the topic was over. After a few moments of awkward silence, the room returned to a somewhat state of calm. As more matters were discussed, Naruto had lost the interest long ago. Ultimately, nothing was agreed upon. Their villages had too many differences, both idealistic and history-wise. The Kage filed out of the room quietly. Gaara and Tsunade being the last ones left in the room, but before Onikia left, he walked over to Naruto, putting everyone on guard. You speak with the same passion as your father did. With that, the man turned on his heel and walked out of the room, shocking everyone by the abrupt declaration. Naruto blinked in surprise before watching the old man leave the room with a frown, wondering what brought that announcement on. Tsunade also looked like she was about to talk to him, but in the end, she simply sighed and walked out, shaking her head. Naruto finally pushed himself off the wall, walking over to Jiraiya before the Toad Sage could run off to do Kami knows what. Well, Naruto, you certainly spoke with conviction back there. Naruto just narrowed his eyes. Why wasn't I told? His eyes held no real hostility, and to be honest, he perfectly understood the reasons behind the decision. He just wanted to hear it for himself. Jiraiya seemed to understand that as he took in Naruto's wary expression, placing a hand on the blonde's shoulders. Since I thought it best you didn't know until you were powerful enough to handle the responsibilities of both your father and mother's heritage. Both of them had gathered a fair few enemies in their time, and while unfair, some of those enemies would have looked at their only son for revenge. And then you left, and he never had the chance. Not that I believe he would have, even by the Chunin exams, mind you, since they tended to keep things close to his chest. Naruto just nodded tiredly. He felt all the anger from earlier wash away. Not that he had forgiven them entirely. There's something else I need to talk to you about. And Jiraiya just motioned to the door. Let's walk. I'm sure you have many questions about your parents. I don't know if you know this, but I was your father's sensei. Naruto just nodded. He did know that. All right, let's talk. End of chapter 54.